last video, we had set up IBM IoT and the IoT Hub with a couple devices, one the ingress, one the egress, and the other aspect that you got to consider on IBM, especially for this scenario, is the loopback. So if you remember, we're sending data and we're also receiving data back to test the latency, the round trip latency. So to make that work, what we're going to have to do is create a loopback. And I create that loopback on the IBM Watson using a NodeRED service. So this is an app. It's a Cloud Foundry app. I'll show you where to install that now. So this is the IBM Watson IoT platform, and we created two devices. We have to get out of here and get back to the IBM Bluemix.net dashboard. So if you log into your Bluemix.net account and go to dashboard, you're going to be presented with something like this. And you'll probably just have an IoT device. What you're going to need to do is actually create a NodeRED instance. So you go over to create resource, and you can search for NodeRED here. NodeRED. And right down in the middle of the page is the NodeRED starter. And this is a light edition. So the light edition is actually free. So anything that's signified with this light icon is a free service. So I've already installed NodeRED. I'm not going to go through the paces of installing that and naming it. You can do that. It's pretty straightforward. But one thing you have to do is connect this instance, this application of NodeRED, with the IoT Watson instance that you already created, so it can communicate to the devices and the topics branches. So if we go back to the dashboard, and you've created your instance, the next thing you're going to have to do is create the connection between the two. So if I click on the IoT platform, this is where you would launch IoT platform. I actually don't want to go here. I want to actually go to the connections. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard, and I'm going to click on the Cloud Foundry app. And here you see Cloud Foundry running. It's running an instance of NodeRED, one instance. I'm using 256 megs of memory, total allocation 256 megs. And what you're going to have to do is actually create a connection. Here I have a connection between the NodeRED app and the Internet of Things package. What you need to do is also mimic that and create a connection just as I already have. And that's also straightforward, but that is a requirement to ensure that your apps can communicate to the external world in the IoT Watson platform. After you've done that, you can kick off NodeRED. So that's pretty easy to do. So if we go back to our dashboard and I go to this instance of NodeRED, you can get all the usage information and whatnot. You can restart it, stop it. This is important if you run into an issue. And you can go ahead and launch it. And your launch point will take you somewhere here where you see NodeRED on IBM Cloud. Go to the NodeRED editor flow, and it'll present you with the nodes that are already running. I already have one that's running here, and this is the loopback. And in the loopback, what I wanted to show you were the particulars of how I set this up to go and communicate, receive data on the topics branch, and send data back out on another topic branch, the command branch. So the first thing you need to do, if we dive into the MQTT instance that I propagated here, is go into the broker, and this is going to be the exact same origin, ID, and the domain that we used on the device. This is the device. Port 8883, enable SSL TLS, and if we look at that, there's I'm not using any certificates. But this is important. You have to use the client ID with the A origin ID, and the demo app ID. I'm going to show you where that is in the next video, but that's going to be important because every app needs an application ID just as every device has a device ID. So the flow here is you're going to take JSON objects in, you're going to receive events, and you're going to force out a command. And again, this is the topics branch, and you see IoT2, type, and it's a demo type, ID is a demo2 device. Now this is really important because remember I had two devices that were used on the IBM IoT Watson device instance. I had demo 1 and demo 2 for the reason that demo 1 is the client ID associated with the events. So it's the topics branch that's receiving events from the sensor. And demo 2 is the client ID that is pushing commands from IBM to the device. So this is the nomenclature you would use. This is the topics branch that I'm using. So it still is test, and the format is JSON. I also have a small debug output here, but that's just so we can see events. So when this is running, what you would see, if I go back to my flow on the device, if I actually kick this off and start generating events, you're going to see the events propagate here. And this is the timestamp that I injected from the device. So it received the timestamp and output the timestamp, hence the loopback. This service is always running, so I can stop it here by double-clicking on the tab and then clicking on enable or disable. But it's always running as a service on the IBM cloud. So this is how the loopback is associated. What I wanted to show you was where the app ID is associated on IBM's Watson IoT platform. So if we get out of NodeRED and go back to the IBM Watson IoT platform, what you're going to see here are the devices we set up, demo 1 and demo 2. Demo 1 being the output of an event, demo 2 being the input of a command. But in the pull down on the left, you also have an application. And I created apparently several applications. The one of interest here is this demo app that I've been using, which is app a-my origin ID, my UP9K3, and then a unique app ID, which is this value here. If we look into this, what you see is that you can give it different controls. It has an API key, and when you create an app, an API key in this case, we'll call this test for video. You don't want this to expire. If you're doing demo purposes, I would just turn that off. That's the default. And the role this plays is going to be a standard application. There's several other roles. We're not going to get into that for the sake of brevity right now. And we're going to generate the keys. And these are the keys that are going to be interesting. You want to preserve them. You want to preserve the API key and the authentication token, because that's what's going to be used here when you subscribe to that event. So if you look at this, this will be the client ID. The security will be app, the origin ID, and that value, which was on a different app that I used. I'll go back here. And the password itself is also listed. And I have a crib sheet for you that kind of describes what that looks like. We're going to put up that crib sheet on the next video and then continue gluing everything together. Thank you.